Number 5. Whilst in the WEC, Joseph Benavidez spent majority of his career fighting in the bantamweight division. He had faced then WEC bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz twice and had lost to him both times. When the UFC announced that they will be creating a new flyweight division, Joseph Benavidez made the drop down to the division and has just fitted perfectly, defeating all of his competition in the division except the dominant champion Demetrius Johnson, who he has lost to twice. He recently defeated Henry Cejudo by a split decision at the Ultimate Fighter 24 finale. He is currently on a 6-fight winning streak and will likely get the next shot at the UFC flyweight title. Number 4. Frankie Edgar fought in the UFC lightweight division and was very successful, winning the UFC lightweight belt. After losing to Benson Henderson twice, losing his title, the UFC president Dana White advised him to drop down to the featherweight division. Frankie Edgar listened to Dana White's advice and made the transition. In his first fight in the division, he was given the immediate title shot against then UFC featherweight champion Jose Aldo at UFC 156, where he lost the fight by a unanimous decision. After the loss, he put together a solid 5-fight winning streak and was very successful in his new weight division. He next fought for the interim UFC featherweight title in a rematch against Jose Aldo at UFC 200, where he lost the fight by a unanimous decision. He last defeated Jeremy Stephens by a unanimous decision at UFC 205. Number 3. After failing weight numerous times at the welterweight limit, Anthony Johnson was released by the UFC and had fought in various other promotions. Whilst fighting outside the UFC, he made the transition to the light heavyweight division and has looked like a completely different fighter. He put together a 6-fight winning streak before re-signing with the UFC. Since his return, he quickly put together 3 wins, earning himself a title shot against Daniel Cormier for the vacant UFC light heavyweight title at UFC 187, where in the fight he was submitted via a rear naked choke in the 3rd round. After the fight, he defeated Jimmy Manuwa, Ryan Bader, Glover Teixeira, all by knockout to earn himself another title shot. He will next face the last man to defeat him, Daniel Cormier, for the UFC light heavyweight title in 2017. Number 2. Daniel Cormier fought at heavyweight when he fought for Strikeforce. When he came to the UFC, he defeated Frank Mir and Roy Nelson with ease. Due to not wanting to fight his teammate, Cain Velasquez, he made the drop to the UFC light heavyweight division, where he defeated both Dan Henderson and Patrick Cummings and took on then UFC light heavyweight champion John Jones at UFC 182, where he lost the fight by a unanimous decision. After John Jones was involved in a hit-and-run accident, he was stripped of the UFC light heavyweight title. Both Anthony Johnson and Daniel Cormier fought for the vacant title at UFC 187, where Daniel Cormier submitted Anthony Johnson via a rear naked choke in the 3rd round, becoming the new UFC light heavyweight champion of the world. He next successfully defended his title against Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 192 and defeated Anderson Silva in a short notice fight at UFC 200. He will next face the number 1 contender Anthony Johnson in 2017. Number 1. Whilst in the WEC, Demetrius Johnson fought in the bantamweight division and was very small for the weight class. When he came into the UFC, he put together some wins and earned himself a title shot against the UFC bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz at UFC on vs 6, where he lost the fight by a unanimous decision. When the UFC introduced the flyweight division, Demetrius Johnson made the drop down to the division and was very successful, winning the UFC belt, and has looked amazing, defeating all of his competition in a very dominant fashion. He has shown in his fights that he is just levels beyond his opponents and is just too smart in the octagon. He last defeated Tim Elliott by a unanimous decision at the Ultimate Fighter 24 finale.